Welcome to A Cup of Gratitude with Amanda Schaefer. Hi, I'm your host, and I'm so glad you stopped by. This podcast is really for anyone, anywhere, anytime. And it's about taking a moment to slow down and look around and actually see all of the good things that are there. There's no question that asks, is your cup half empty or half full? But I think a better question is, what's in your cup? I mean, a drop of gratitude will benefit your life unimaginably more than a full cup of anything else. So let's settle in and take a look at how we can shift our focus and embrace the joy and the wonder of the life that we have. And once you start, you won't be able to stop seeing the good. And just like me, you won't be able to stop talking about it. And somehow that creates even more. Even in the midst of difficulty, even when it's really hard. Learn how to drink from a cup of gratitude. Welcome. Today we are talking to Stephanie L. Jones. She is on a mission to inspire others to give and practice gratitude daily. She's shared a message on the power of giving, gratitude, and goals with thousands from the stage, her podcast, Giving Your Best Life, and through her books, The Giving Challenge and The Gratitude Challenge. This is a woman after my own heart. Welcome, Stephanie. How are you today?
Thank you. So grateful to be here. It's a good day. The sun is shining.
It is here too. We had a horrible storm last night with hail and all kinds of good stuff. It was going sideways.
Oh, wow. That's no fun, but it's a good reminder. You know, the sun always comes back out after those storms.
Amen. So I wanted to start at the beginning, if you don't mind. I love to see what happens when we learn about the foundation of somebody's life. Could you tell us a little bit about your childhood?
Sure. I would say I thought I had a childhood that everybody had until I went to college, and then I realized how lucky I was. I grew up in small town Indiana. My parents are still married, I think 45 years. Very, very hard workers. That was important in my family. Everybody chipped in and, just worked together, to make the family work. I grew up in the church, so I can't remember. I mean, my parents were probably taking me to church as soon as I was born, and it was the same church that my mom grew up in, and her parents grew up in, and her grandparents grew up in, this little.
That's awesome.
Yeah, like single room, with a little steeple. I loved it. It was such a community. And we didn't have a lot of money, but we really didn't think about that. It wasn't. I don't know. It was that time in our lives where I think life was simpler.
Yeah.
And my parents spent a lot of time with us, being outside and hiking. We had a local state park. And I can remember my mom worked late on Thursday nights. And so my dad would take my sister and I over there every Thursday nights. It was like Tony's Pizza and then go to the park. And we'd either hike or we loved deer. We always joked that we were hunting deer, but we never shot them. We would shoot them with cameras.
Yeah.
And, we loved enjoying nature, and very, very close family. I have a younger sister who we're 15 months apart. And so it was just a good childhood.
Wow, it sounds like it was. I mean, it sounds like a beautiful time. Not everyone has those kind of memories that I get to talk to. How do you think you share those values that you have with others as a grown woman?
Sure. So one is through giving. That's really my platform. If anybody follows me on social media, I'm the giving gal. And that, even though, I mentioned we didn't have a lot of money or material things growing up, but I saw my parents in action in our community volunteering. My dad was a volunteer firefighter for 20 years, and no joke, like if he would get a call and he had my sister and I, like we would go to the firehouse, and sometimes we'd stay at the firehouse by ourselves. Sometimes we would go to the fires and sit in the truck, but I can remember our pastor calling my dad one time when he had a bat in the house. And that's just who my dad was in our community,
Yeah.
I don't know who to call. Let me call Pete because he'll figure it out. But my mom was also like, she is a fabulous like baker and cook. So we were
Mhm.
always in the kitchen making cookies, making breads, making soups that we were taking to those that were sick, those that were shut in. There was an elderly man in our community who was not married. And so I feel like we went to his house every week just to visit him and take him food.
That
And
is
so,
beautiful. I mean, what
yeah.
amazing examples your parents were. No wonder this is kind of the platform of your life, your focus.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really big on that being a focus for families and for parents and teaching that because I even
Yeah,
see, I don't have children, but I see my sister with her children and they have that heart of giving. But I think you really have to instill that in children. They practice kind of what they see oftentimes.
absolutely. Absolutely. My kids are the same way, but it's only because they've seen me be that way. And I think it's so important. And even in addition to your families, the other community that's part of your everyday life, the people that you bring around your children are the people that they're going to emulate. And if they're doing things that make the world a better place, that's what your kids are going to do too. And if you don't have children, as you don't, you can still help another community of people to learn that. And that's what you're doing. And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about community, and that was one big thing as a child. Like I said, is my mom was a working mom, and our neighbors helped to take care of us. They were our babysitters. I had
Yeah.
a neighbor that was a teacher, so in the summers, I went to her house every day. My friend's parents, whose mom may have stayed at home, helped pick me up from basketball practice or softball
Yeah.
practice or whatever it was, and we just lived in that community where people pitched in and helped each other out with each other's kids and took care of them like their own. And I'm blessed to say I have a lot of moms, that when I go home, it's like I want to see them too because they helped raise me.
Yeah, absolutely. They say it takes a village. It's a saying for a reason. It really does.
Yeah.
And all of the nuances and the beautiful new things that you get from each one of those people that becomes part of that community are things that you would not have gotten just from your own family. And I think that the world really needs to get back to that. It's more of an unusual occurrence when you have that these days.
Yeah, I agree. I think of a story of my mom's best friend. We've been best friends since kindergarten, and I rode the bus to her house one time,
Mhm.
and I left my little suitcase on the bus. And her mom, I can still see this, even though I was little, like jumped in her car and chased that school bus down to get my suitcase. But I thought, like, isn't that what we need for our children in the communities? Like
Yes.
those advocates, those women that are willing to hop in a car, chase
Yeah.
down a bus, and do what they have to do. So I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, that's awesome. What a great story. So you're married, correct?
Yes,
Could you
celebrating 18 years, I
18
think.
years? Wow, that's amazing. Would you share with us a little bit about your home life? I love to hear about people's partners, the people they share their life with, and kind of who God set them up with.
Yeah, absolutely. I met my husband in the police academy, and sometimes I don't think that was a good thing because he doesn't let me get away with kind of whining and complaining and no, I can't do that. He knows better. He's kind of
Uh-huh.
seen me in action. So,
Uh-huh.
um, I'm not a police officer. My husband still is, and that's a big part of our life. I hate to say it, but one thing that people don't understand is, our officers, at least for my husband, he's on duty 24 hours a day,
Yeah.
and that takes priority. Not that he wants that to be his priority in his life. I know I am, but there is no not answering the call.
Yeah.
Saturday there was a murder. My husband got called out. I don't know when he's coming home. Yesterday he thought he would be home at 4:30. It's 6:30 and he's still not home. And so that's very much our home life. And it has been for the entire time that I've been married with him. And we've had our ups and downs, but I think a couple of things is one, quitting is not an option for us. We've never given up on our marriage and the commitment that we made to each other.
Yeah.
We've always fought for that. Even if we were fighting, we were still fighting for that. A day doesn't go by. We had a friend, one of his best friends was killed in the line of duty really early on in our marriage. And that really opened my eyes. So there isn't a day. I mean, in the 18 years, I could probably count on my hand that there isn't a day he doesn't leave the house, no matter what's going on, where it's hugs and kisses and I love
Yeah.
you, be
Yeah.
safe. We don't go to bed without saying goodnight and kissing goodnight. We always sleep in the same bed. There's no like, I'm mad at you, sleep on the couch.
Yeah.
And I think it's those small things that keep you going. And it seems like we have a lot of humor in our home. And so even if we're mad at each other, like I always feel like something stupid happens and then we laugh about it. And then
Yeah.
it's like, okay, that was really stupid. But I also make it a goal. I'm big on goals. That's one of the 3 things on my platform that I talk and write about. And I mean, this year it is one of my goals, and it has been for years, is at least one weekly date night with my husband. And that's very important because I think in the busyness of life, it's
Yeah.
easy to do everything but spend time with the people that are close to us
Yeah,
and that
that's
are
right.
most important to us. Um, yeah, so that's our home life's a little crazy, even though we don't have kids. My husband started his own woodworking business a year ago. So when he's not, being a police officer, he's out in the shop. We're both entrepreneurs, but I think we do life well together, even though it's crazy and probably not what a lot of people's lives look like.
Well, it doesn't sound crazy at all. It sounds wonderful. And I feel like his job helps you both to prioritize gratitude and living in the moment and what you actually have. And that's just an amazing thing. I love also that one of your goals is to do that date night. My parents have been married over 65 years and they still have date nights, even in the house,
Wow.
you know, and it's a wonderful thing. They make sure that they remain thankful for this other person in their life that's helped them deal with everything that's come along the road. And yeah, sometimes there's arguments and sometimes you crack a joke, but you have to traverse it all together. And honestly, having him be in that position, I didn't know that you met him there. I didn't know that you had also been in the academy, but it probably helps you to understand more because you started out there.
Oh,
What?
100%, 100%. And I will say I was a police officer for a short time. And I always have to remember that,
Yeah,
when police officers come home, they're on this such high. People don't realize when you are out, it's not like a job where you can just take a break or you can not focus. Is when you're in your car and you're driving around, you always have to be on. You have this
yeah,
heightened sense of awareness of there's a drunk driver in front of me, there's a call of a guy on a bridge who's getting ready to commit suicide, there's a house on fire, like
yeah,
there's a crash. And like you always have to be prepared for that next thing. And for me, it has taught me a lot of understanding and to show a lot of grace. He comes home
yeah,
and who knows what he has seen that day, and
yeah,
um to remember that he needs time and space, but it also that gratitude and perspective of when he leaves, he may not come home. And
yeah,
so really it's most of the stuff that we're ever fighting about really doesn't matter. Like
yeah, that's
in the
right.
grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter.
That's right. And you said something very important. It helps you give him grace because you understand. And I don't think people give each other enough grace at all. I was wondering, and we didn't really talk about this in our pre-recording call, but what has it been like over the past year with all of the civil unrest and all of the turmoil and all of the pointing at the people who are actually out there protecting us and living in that way, at that heightened awareness and all in 24 hours a day?
Yeah, it's been very, very difficult. We went through this, I don't know, like 6, 7, 8 years ago,
Mhm.
um, when Ferguson happened.
Yeah.
It was actually very dangerous. I used to have a thin blue line license plate on my car in memory of 3 friends that were killed in the line of duty. I have some apparel that talks about back the blue,
Mhm.
and literally we had to take all that off because families were getting threatened. My husband and I have,
Wow.
emergency codes. I know how to respond if I'm with him and something happens.
Yeah.
And the last year has been probably the most difficult. And in our 18 years, I've never asked my husband. I'll get choked up.
Yeah.
Uh, I've never asked my husband to quit his job.
Yeah.
And I have multiple times. I have multiple times because it's not worth it for me. No
Yeah.
pension, no health insurance. And that's how a lot of families feel. It's no longer worth their spouses to leave the home,
Yeah.
which they do every day. The majority, the overwhelming, the data. If people actually look at data and facts,
Yeah.
our officers make millions of stops and interactions with people every year. And the overwhelming support is actually for our law enforcement officers. We don't see that in the media. And
Well, that's right. The media has hijacked whatever
yeah,
story they would like to tell.
yeah, they have. And so I keep begging my husband retire early.
Yeah.
And he won't do it,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, he didn't get in this profession for a pension or a paycheck.
Yeah.
Uh, he loves what he does,
Yeah.
and
He has a
he's
heart to
he,
protect, and
yeah, yeah.
I can hear that. And we
He
need people like that.
Yeah, he's literally willing to lay down his life
Yeah.
for anybody, for
Yeah.
anybody. And and I've got to see that in action.
Yeah.
In the state of Indiana, he's allowed to have his police car and I'm allowed to be in it off duty. And my husband has stopped to help on more than one occasion. People in their time of need, he did not care what they look like, what their
Yeah.
color was, what their gender was, with his wife in the car,
Yeah.
not knowing who that person was. And to me, that's pretty incredible that somebody is willing to risk both of their lives to help somebody in need in one
It's
of their,
powerful. It's
yeah,
powerful. And it just goes to prove what we're talking about, that people that are out there doing what your husband's doing, they're doing it for a reason, that their heart cares about the world and cares about people. They're not doing it to go out to look for something to get into where they're actually hurting someone. They have to defend themselves sometimes. And I do believe that the media has just taken some situations and only shown portions of what's going on, or shown us somebody who maybe didn't do a good job, but then not balanced it with showing us those who do.
yeah. My husband always says when he was first, I think it was his first year of a trooper, he stopped a vehicle on the interstate. So just think about the dangers of that.
Yeah.
People flying by 60, 70 mile an hour, not even caring that you're on the side of the road.
Yeah.
And he said he could not even he was barely out of his vehicle and this guy was on top of him and he was wrestling for his life on the side of the road,
Wow.
and I think ended up breaking the guy's arm.
Wow.
But he said, can you imagine if that would have happened in today's society? Like
Yeah.
somebody driving and not seeing the first 10 seconds of
Yeah.
our
Cell phone
interaction.
out. Let's take a
Yeah.
video of it. Yep. Yeah.
And not seeing that first 10 seconds, which were the most important,
Yeah.
and that guy ended up being on PCP. And if you know anything about that, they have like this incredible strength, no
Yes. Yes.
fear. And my husband saying, okay, and then thinking about that, like that not getting out that this guy was on PCP,
Yeah.
approached me. So I'm grateful for a lot of those things that
Yeah.
early in his career that he had to deal with split second, not even split second, and that he's always come home safe.
Yeah. Well, I will say on behalf of many people, I'm so thankful for his service.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It means a lot.
And I appreciate everyone out there like him who's doing a great job.
Thank you.
So, would you tell us about the year 2019? You
Oh,
had you had said that it was your best speaking year. You gave a TEDx talk. Your business was developing new content. You were gaining momentum. And then what happened?
yeah. I have a lot of people tell me, yeah, I want to be a speaker, and it seems like easy. Let me just go speak. But I've been speaking for like a decade, and it's a lot of hard work just to make connections and build a reputation. And that's where I finally hit my tipping point in 2019, where I was keynoting events and conferences and
Mhm.
leadership and women lunching. Yeah, I did my TEDx talk, which went well, and I had local companies coming to me saying, hey, can you do 2-day leadership development? And it's like, sure, I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Um, and then I started working on my goals. I'm a big proponent to, work on your goals, November going into December. And I really felt like God telling me to not focus on speaking in 2020.
Yeah.
And that was interesting, literally going off of for my
Uh-huh.
side business, something that I had worked so hard for, had momentum, most revenue that year, and then God
Uh-huh.
saying, don't focus on that next year in 2020. That was interesting.
Yeah. It's amazing how many people God said similar things to who felt like, hey, we've hit our stride, we're doing what we're supposed to do. And he just pretty much said, lay it down. And, what I wanted to ask you is, you were feeling confident, you were being faithful to follow God in your speaking. And then suddenly when he prompted you to stop, like, how did it make you feel? I remember when he stopped me in my tracks, how it made me feel, but we're all different. Like, how did it make you feel? Because you were out there doing what you think he had for you to do.
Yeah, a little confused.
Yeah.
But also like I feel like there was a piece, I
Yeah.
think if you learn to listen to God and you battle, you fight against listening to him, and then you do what you want to do,
Yeah.
and you do that learn enough, you learn that it's like, okay, this doesn't make sense. But when you follow that and
Yeah.
you get to the other side, sometimes you don't get to the other side, or maybe you're still in it. But when you get to the other side of some of those things and you go, oh, okay, you were
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, so even though it was a little bit confusing, and I'm sure I had other emotions, but I also remember a piece of kind of like,
Yeah.
okay, like let's go with this, and really felt called to focus on my writing
Yeah.
going into 2020.
Yeah. How did your feelings change when the pandemic actually came? I
Great.
remember feeling, oh my goodness, I feel so prepared. Thank you for preparing me. I could have been out doing this or that, but you told me ahead of time.
Yeah, grateful.
Yeah.
And that's not a word a lot of people use when the pandemic hit, but I'm connected. I have a lot of friends in the industry that are speakers full time,
Mhm.
who were scrambling, who were distraught, who were literally lost all their income. And,
Yeah.
my heart broke for those people, but I was grateful that I had not put the time and energy. I can't imagine. It had to be devastating. I cannot imagine putting the time and energy that goes into just getting one booking, just one speaking engagement, and to have that all go away, and not only go away, but not knowing what it was going to look like, if that was going to come back. And I will say I had two speaking engagements, and I got the last one in the Wednesday. I think it was like the Wednesday before everything shut down.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, so many people were just blindsided by the pandemic. And I do also feel grateful that when you have a relationship with God and you listen and you've learned obedience. I was just talking to somebody today about, I said, if you're obedient, but you're kind of complaining about it, but you do what God tells you to do anyway, is it still obedience? And I felt like I needed to go look at the parable of the two sons. And, you know, God gave them something to do. The father gave them something to do. And one son said, I'm not going to do it. But then he went and he did it. And the other said, oh, I'll do it. And then he never went. And it was the first son who did the will of the father. And so it made me feel a little bit better, because sometimes I've kind of complained, but then I've been obedient. And as you said, the more that you know him, and the more that you know that what he has for you is good, even if it doesn't make sense, the more that you will immediately be obedient. But there are times where I kind of will complain about it or argue with him about it or not understand it. But he'll allow me to do that anyway.
No, I totally agree. And I can think of other instances where I'm like, oh yeah, I was not happy about that.
Yeah. But it's always with the hindsight, then you see what he was doing and you know that he was giving you the best.
And I think that's what grows your faith, though, also.
Yeah.
That grows your faith and your trust. But you have to start with those small things. I mean, it's like God gives you the small things,
Hmm.
and sees if he can trust you with that. And if you have faith in him and trust, and you go, okay. And then when you do that, he's like, oh, okay. And, like, I don't know. That's just what I've experienced in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that. Now, you had shared with me during our pre-recording call that you're pretty much a hermit, but when God gives you a message, that you speak, you go and you carry out his will. And this is exactly what we're talking about. Like, how does that feel, going from being more introverted to being on the stage as a speaker?
Yes, which I've changed my term. I am now a recluse.
Okay.
Um, I don't know if you saw, but I got bit by a brown recluse in April.
I did. I
And
did.
my husband came home one day, and he said he wasn't even thinking about like the bite. And he was
Right.
like, "You're such a recluse." And I was like, "I love that. That's my new title. Like, I literally got bit by a brown recluse. I'm going to take that on and own it." Um, I feel like God has given me such the gift to be able to get on stage and carry whatever message that he's been able to give me, or that
Mhm.
he's given me for that day, for that audience. Is I almost feel like I have this split personality, is because one of my biggest fears is going to an event and
Mhm.
not knowing anybody. I just went to a retirement party the other day. I'll give you an example. And I literally went there. I got a glass of water. I stood in line, hugged my friend, congratulated her, and left. I don't like the uncomfortableness of being in an environment where I don't know anybody. I've got to make small talk.
Mhm.
Very out of my comfort zone. Now, when I go to an event and I'm the keynote speaker,
Yeah.
like, that's an immediate connection, that because people will ask me questions. I can
Yeah.
ask them questions about their life. And once I've been on the stage, I don't even have to do any talking. People just come to my table and they pour their life history out to me.
Mhm.
But that can also be very exhausting for me as an introvert who, kind of
Yeah.
keeps my group small, to then be at an event, especially if it's a couple of days, and just have people pour into you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a balance, but I feel like it's what God's called me to do, and I'll be faithful in that. And I actually, I enjoy the stage. I love it.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting Because God created you, that He
Yeah.
took someone with that type of personality, and that's who He wants to use on the stage. I think there's a big dose of humility in someone who spends more time on their own. And I think that that's one of the proponents He uses in wanting to pour through you His messages.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I've never looked at it from that angle, but I think it goes back to what we were just talking about, obedience.
Yeah.
Because before events, as events start getting closer, I start in my head going, why did I commit to this? Like, what did I get myself into? And
Uh-huh.
always having a little bit of dread. And not that I dread the event, I always know. And I think that's how the devil also works, though. Like,
Yeah.
the devil doesn't want me on that stage. The devil doesn't want me carrying that message. And so I think we also have to recognize how the devil attacks us
Yeah.
to convince us at times to go, oh, yeah, I don't want to do this.
Hmm.
And I always have to talk back to that negative voice that the devil is, no, this is what the Lord has called me to do. There's a special reason I'm there, even if it's for one person. I'll get on that stage and deliver that message.
Absolutely, especially if it's for one person. I
Yep.
feel like in everything I've ever done, if one person connects to God or is helped or healed in some way, then everything was worth it.
Yeah, I think that's where we get lost a lot of times now in the days of social media.
Yeah.
Is people look at, well, how many likes did I get? How
Mhm.
many shares? How many views? That's what society kind of says is success. I mean, you even think about the publishing industry.
Yeah.
If you're trying to get a book deal, it's the number of followers, like what's your engagement? Everything's about the number.
Mhm.
And if I go back to my giving journey, one of the biggest lessons I learned was, my mission was me, one person, looking to make a difference in one person's life each day. And so I always think about that. If I start to get frustrated about something I've shared or whatever, it's
Yeah.
like, no, focus on that one. If that made one person happy, made one person smile, changed one person's day, okay, I've done my job. And at the end of the day, I feel like God's in control of all that. Put out, share your heart, what you're supposed to, and let Him lead and guide. That's out of your hands.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we need to stop comparing. Comparison is just running rampant because of social media. You'll look at what other people are doing or what some other person's ministry or whatever it is that whatever area you're working in and compare. And I've tried really hard not to do that. I've even had people contact me saying like, "Hey, how did you do this or that or whatever?" And I'll give them whatever information I can, but I normally take that opportunity to say, "Please don't compare though what you're doing to what I'm doing because God's given us each a separate call. And to whomever He's given a call, He's going to also help us fulfill it."
Yeah, I agree 100%. And it's really hard. I had to step away from a lot of the entrepreneur groups and book groups I was in the
Mhm.
beginning because that's all I was doing. I was trying to duplicate or copy what someone else was doing because that gave them success. But the
Yeah.
entire time, it was like I would constantly feel God saying, well, you need to be doing this. You need to be focusing here. I think along with that, which this is really something like I'll stand on my soapbox, and women, I think, are the worst about like competing against each other and not being willing to
Yes.
help
Oh,
each other and lift each other up. And, I'm big on like the world's big enough for all of us. Like, why can't we just cheer each other on and support each other? And, I've had people like really good friends who I've done a lot of stuff for, like, oh, yeah, I can't share your book on social media because X, Y, and Z, or, and it's just like, I just want to say you're letting other people control your life and what you can and can't do. And what if we just all helped each other out? Um, so
I could not agree with you more. I mean, doing this podcast, part of what I'm doing is linking arms with people who are doing something else, helping them get their story out there because I want to get their story and God's story out there. But I'm also linking arms and giving them another platform with different people where I can share what they're doing, because I do believe that real success is helping those around you and cheering them on, like you said, and seeing when someone's doing something great and saying, "You're doing a great job. How can I help you?" Not, "Oh my goodness, they're doing a great job, so I'm going to not pay any attention and I'm going to go try even harder at what I'm doing." I, it's just the worldly mentality that's seeping in even to ministries, and it's a lie. It's a lie that a lot of women believe that they're in competition, even,
Yeah.
looks, even not even what you're doing. Somebody can be beautiful and you can celebrate, "Wow, you're really beautiful." You don't have to be, "Oh, they're beautiful, they're more beautiful than I am,"
Yeah.
or "I need to go out and I need to dye my hair this color so I can look like them," or whatever. It's just a big spider web of messy lies. We're all
Yeah.
unique, and we were created unique on purpose, and it's beautiful.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I know we weren't connected by another woman, but I got to throw out a shout out to Jasmine.
Yeah.
Because like he's a perfect example, like just a heart of God, such a
Yes.
connector. If he thinks of somebody, it's like, oh, okay, let me take the action, let me take the time instead of
Yeah.
just blowing that off, listening. I always listen to that little tug on my heart when it's like, oh, you should connect these two people. Like he
Yeah.
has such a gift to do that. And that's how we're here having this conversation
I
today.
know, it's amazing. He's wonderful. He's become such a good friend, and I just love everything about his heart. He is for everyone, and he wants everyone to fulfill their purpose and to do so in a way where we're reflecting the glory of God through who we are. And he's just the best. I'm
Yeah.
actually finally got him to come on. So, sometimes people are so busy helping other people. I want to share your story. So that's going to be coming up. I'm going to be recording him on the Saturday.
Oh, very good. Perfect
Yeah.
timing.
Yeah. He's a great guy, and just like you said, such a perfect example of what we should be doing. And when you have those thoughts, you need to stop and do something about them. You
I
know?
agree. They can be a gift to so many.
Yeah. Now, I believe you had told me at one point you were actually a professional organizer. What was
Yes.
that like?
Oh my gosh, it was so interesting. But it was really a gift from God. My husband and I, after his friend was shot and killed in the line of duty, we ended up moving back to his district. And I knew not a single soul. I basically left an entire life where I had everything
Wow.
to 2.5, 3 hours away from all of that to knowing no one. And I started this professional organizing business, and that's how I met. Like that's how I got friends in the community that I'm in. Some of my first friends were clients of mine. Yeah, I mean, I thought, I can remember the first call I got. I was standing in Barnes and Noble, and I
Uh-huh.
was like, well, snap, what am I supposed to do now? I've never organized anybody. Like I've been an organized person, but I never
Yeah.
done it for someone else. And um, but what I realized very quickly was helping people organize their stuff isn't
Mhm.
about the stuff you're organizing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I quickly learned that my psychology degree was going to be very helpful. And, just having conversations and asking lots of questions.
Yeah.
I feel like that's one way I was successful is just asking questions for people and kind of getting to some root causes, and but then also turning their space into something beautiful and that they could use. And yeah, that was a fun time in my life. It actually took me, I had TLC fly me to New York, and I auditioned for my own television show, which that show
Oh,
never ended
cool.
up taking off, but it was a cool experience.
Yeah.
And yeah, it led to, me doing the coaching that I do now and some of the
Well, that's what
clients.
I was gonna say. I
Yeah.
feel like that was God giving you kind of this season to realize that, yeah, you had that psychology degree for a reason, and He wanted you to use that, and that people needed someone to sit down and ask them key questions and care about them and help guide them.
Yeah, and it takes, and this, I want to say that it's not going to come out humble, but I mean it in a humble way, is it takes a special person to walk into somebody's house and not judge them and
Yeah.
just meet them where they are. And I can't tell you how many times a client, I'm talking to them on the phone, I'm doing the interview with them before I go there, and it's embarrassment, it's shame,
Yeah.
it's, their kids can't have friends over, they can't
Yeah.
have friends over, and they're just so scared that I'm going to judge them. And I was even joking with one of my girlfriends. I'm going to her house this weekend. And, she said, I'm so sorry, my house is going to be a mess, whatever. And I was like, remember, I was a professional organizer. Like I always tell people, I'm not there to judge,
Yeah.
and I think that's a good lesson for all of us is, like, let's not enter someone's home and judge them what their,
Absolutely.
life looks like. Yeah. So
Yeah, honestly, I think one of the most beautiful stories I can remember is my grandmother on my mom's side. She she was a church organist and she spent a lot of time at the church and doing things for the church. But when my grandfather passed away, she had been very everything was always in the same place. I can in my mind's eye still see every knickknack where everything was. But at that time when my grandfather passed away, she started doing things for widows in the church, taking them to appointments, having them for lunch, and she started leaving dishes in the sink and leaving things around. And I remember it was like I didn't know Jesus then, but it was for me one of the best examples of servanthood. Like she put aside her need to have things a certain way to care for others. And I thought her house was way more beautiful that way.
I love that beautiful mess. I used to go talk to moms groups on organizing, and that's what I entitled,
Yeah.
my talk was This Beautiful Mess.
Yeah.
And we kind of dug into that conversation. So you're so right. But I also think to a point in that is let's say somebody comes in and they judge and say, oh, look at her house or look at the dishes in her sink,
Mhm.
not knowing that she's actually been out serving others.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of judgy people out there. So could you tell us a little bit about why you're called the Giving Gal? I know why, but could you tell the listeners that might not know?
Sure. So on January 1st, 2011, I cannot believe it's been a decade, I
Wow.
started what I now refer to as my giving journey. I set a goal to give a gift every day for a year. I did that, exceeded it, went 522 days, and that journey changed my life. I missed day 523, took a break, but it had not only become a habit, but a real lifestyle. And I missed it and I picked it back up. And I can honestly say for almost a decade, I've been giving a gift every day for 10 years.
Wow, what a beautiful legacy.
Thank you. Thank
That's
you.
that's a really amazing thing. Now, as a coach, you've helped a lot of people who are stuck. And you clearly, to me, have this heart of a mother. You're like investing in others with that true caring and calling that a mom has. I mean, moms challenge us to do new things, to grow. They nurture us. They help prepare us to be our best self. Do you see that spirit of motherhood in yourself?
Um, I didn't until you and I were talking in the pre-call, and then I was like, oh yeah, like I've got all these people in my life who
Yeah.
I had never looked at it through that lens. I guess not through my coaching, but outside of my coaching, I have girls in college and now graduated college, that call me mom,
Yeah.
which is kind of crazy, but it's just how it happened. And yeah, I mean, the women that I coach, I guess I don't look through it through that lens, but I tend to work with women 40 to 70 who are
Mhm.
kind of in the second phase of their life. Maybe kids are grown, high school, college, out of the house. and it's like, what's next for me? But I'm still stuck. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of fear, doubt. They need a little courage. I always tell people, I'll be your courage and confidence till you get some, and I'll be here like cheering you on the way, encouraging you.
Yeah.
And but man, it is so rewarding for me on the other side of that when it goes back to that professional organizing where I gained that skill of asking the right questions. And
Yeah.
even today, like we're on audio and we're not on video,
Yeah.
because you can listen to what people are not saying, and then that's when you dig in a little bit more. And I think that's a gift God's given, both of us.
Yeah, absolutely. I see all of those qualities of motherhood in you, no matter what age the people you're helping. One of the biggest qualities that I really appreciate is that you're helping people learn how to go ahead and be successful on their own. And that's what a good mom does. A good mom does not remain your mama bear, taking care of you all the time forever when you're grown up. They teach you how to go and live life to its fullest for yourself.
Ooh, I like that. I like that. Well, I think too is for me, like, oh, it's one of my passions. I feel like God has called us all. We all have a calling, a purpose, and I want women to pursue that.
Yeah.
Like I so want to, if they don't have the courage or the strength to get through whatever they're doing, I want to help them so bad to get through that so they can go out and live what God called them to do and make a difference. And yeah, I just have a passion right there.
Yes. Yeah.
To help.
And God gives us those passions.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah, I love seeing what you're doing with it.
Thank
Now,
you.
you had a coach of your own during the time that you were working on a different kind of book. You had written books, but you had this new book in mind. And it was so different for you that you were like, not really sure about reaching out to your coach about it. Would you tell us more about that and
Sure.
why do you think maybe you were a little bit hesitant or scared to reach out?
Yeah, absolutely. So my first two books, The Giving Challenge and The Gratitude Challenge, both nonfiction books. I don't want to say they were easy to write, but when you're writing about your life, especially the second one, you kind of start to understand how to do this. And
Yeah.
but God laid a children's book on my heart years ago. But I didn't know what to do with that. It was like, well, I don't know anybody that writes children's books. I don't know how to do this. I don't have children. Like all these excuses, what we tend to do when he lays something on our heart, we start thinking of all the reasons why we can't.
Right.
And through, one of the positives of social media is I've connected with people, and I connected with this gal who then had a best friend, and I end up meeting her best friend at a conference, and we just hit it off. And her name's Michelle Medlock Adams, and she writes tons of children's books. I mean, there's some of my favorite. I give them as gifts. She's written 100 books. And probably a year later, from the first time I met her, I went to a conference, and she was doing sessions on writing children's books. And I took that session, and I'd even pitched her the idea that I had for a children's book.
Mhm.
And man, I bet it nagged me for 6 months or more of like, text Michelle, reach out to Michelle, like see if she'll help you. And I think for me is I didn't know what I was doing. And so it was this fear of rejection,
Yeah.
like fear of what if she doesn't like it? Like, what if I'm kind of misinterpreting? What if God didn't lay this on my heart? Where do I go? I mean, it was just all that kind of wrapped up. Finally, it had bugged me so I think that's how like God's really calling you to do something. If it doesn't leave, it just
Yeah. Yeah.
keeps nagging, nagging, nagging. And finally, one day I sent her a text, um, and she said, "Sure, I'll talk with you." And I was like, "Okay." So, yeah.
That's awesome. And as you moved forward with publishing this, you needed an illustrator. Can you
Yes.
tell us who did you find and like what was your experience of trying to share your vision with them? In my case, when I do anything, I have a son who's a graphic artist, and we have kind of this mind meld thing where I can explain something that if I said it to you, you would look at me dumbfounded. And he's like, oh, click, click, click. Is that what you mean? And he can just graphically do something for me that I couldn't get anyone else to get. So what was it experience trying to share your vision, your story with this person you hadn't met?
Yeah. So I met, her name's Angelina. I met her on Instagram, literally searching hashtags, like children's book illustrator. And I knew what I wanted in my head. I could see God gave me such a very clear vision of this book and the character and everything. Um, and so I just started looking at illustrators and what they had done. And when I found her, I looked at some of the books and they were just bright and colorful, and there was a lot of details. And I ordered a couple of the books that she had done and just flipped through them and reached out to her, and she had a spot opening, which is very difficult. Like who knew that these children's illustrators are just booked, some of them years out.
Yeah.
And she's actually in, I believe, Uzbekistan. So she's not even
Wow.
in the United States. She doesn't speak English. But God connected me to her. But I will say is once I got the book written and edited and we had a final, the final copy, I think I sat on that maybe a month or two because, and I'm dyslexic. So dyslexics, you can get like grand visions in your head and you can see everything plain as day. But when you tell me that I need to like translate that out of my mouth to somebody,
Yeah.
or into words, it's very, very difficult. And I just would sit, I would pull up and think about it. A children's book's 500, 600 words. We're not talking, thousands of words.
Right.
And I would look at each scene and I could see it in my head, but it's like, how do I get it out of my head onto a couple of sentences of what I want this to look like? And
Yeah.
finally one day, I mean, I think a lot of too, that again, the devil, that resistance, if you're getting that much resistance, I'll finally hit a point. It's like, put your butt in the chair,
Yeah.
do it, send it. And I will say, oh my gosh, the first little girl she came back with, oh, she was ugly. Oh, and I remember being so sad,
Yeah.
like, oh no, like that's not what I envisioned. And then I start having this doubt, like, what if she can't get to what's in my head?
Yeah.
Um, or also, um, not trying to be a people pleaser and just settling, like, okay, well, I guess this is what she's going to do. It was
Yeah.
pushing back. It was additional research. It was, I sent her pictures when I was a kid, like, this is what I have. And man, she just kept working. And finally she sent me an image one day and I said, make the pigtails a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And I think you've got her. And that's little Giving Gal, little Gabby. And that's the title of the first book is Giving Gal.
That is awesome. I've been spoiled, can't imagine, because I know you do have in your mind, you know exactly what you want. I have this weird thing when I write a book, I have my son make the cover for me first because it
Oh.
helps me keep my goal. And now he just does it. But I know in general what I want to convey pictorially to grab someone towards the subject. And he's such a good guy. He'll sit there and do it. But he's like, Mom, you haven't even done more than a chapter. I'm like, I know, but I need this. And I need that visual. So I can't imagine what it was like going through that process. But I'm so glad that you got connected to the right person.
Oh, it's been such a blessing. And I will say, like, the spreads is once I got out of my head and onto paper, she would send me a spread back and it was better than what I had had in my head. And that's when
Wow.
I think, like, that's when I know this has nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
It's like everything, I had to be the worker bee, like
Uh-huh.
God gave me that idea, the vision, but he set everything in motion, but I did have to be obedient and do the work. And then I see these spreads, or she would come back with something, just her little details, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I didn't envision that, but
Yeah.
that's like way better than what I had in my head. So, and I'm so now excited to like work on the next books and keep going.
That's really cool. And this might sound really strange, but while you were talking about all the little details, I was reminded of when God talked about the temple and how he had all these different people who he had given the ability to craft very particular things. Some people worked on the curtains and the little cherubim and the pomegranates that would be on them. Some were carving things into wood, some were laying stone and following the exact measurements he had given. And yet, all together, that is what created what God was having us recreate, the temple that's in heaven. And as he has us collaborate with people, I think there's an element of that co-creation where he's given everyone a little piece and it's like we're putting together a puzzle. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I mean, you saying it, I just look at the publishing process.
Yeah.
It's from I have this idea to working with Michelle to working with an illustrator. Now I'm working with my production manager and layout designer, Melinda, which then goes to the printer, and I'm working with two ladies at the printer. It's like
Yeah.
those books, it's just not me. Like it
Yeah.
is a team. And I really say, like, the team that I have, God pulled together and made all those connections over the years for me to be able to do what I'm doing now. And that's incredible.
Well, that's right. And God has a plan and a strategy for every situation. He gave you something to do, and when you were obedient and you did it, he gave you everything you needed.
Yeah, and I think that goes back though with like my passion for women, because if they could just see what happens once they get through the really difficult time of working on that calling,
Yeah.
then you'll be on this other side, and then it's like God will say, okay, now this other door is going to open, but you can't get to that other door unless you do this. So think about this children's book series is I don't get to the next one, or I don't get to, I know God has some really cool things, but I had to be obedient and work on this first book. And if I wouldn't, that
Mhm.
just closed all these things that he had for my life, and maybe even impacting people that are going to be touched by, like it's
Yeah.
such a ripple effect. And that's what I see for these women, but they've never been through that. And so
Yeah.
it's like, I'm sitting over here frustrated going, yeah, but I have, like,
Yeah.
just trust me, trust God and move through this. Just take a step,
Yeah.
and then you'll be going, oh my gosh.
Well, it was actually one of the questions I had for you was how did you think that this new chapter in your story was going to encourage others? And I think, God just ferreted that out naturally, organically in our conversation. You can
Yeah.
take all of that and use that as something to show them, hey, there were all these little pieces, but I had to do the foundational obedience first. I had to take the first step in order for the next step to be revealed. And you have to trust in that, in yourself, in me, in God, for the process to begin.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's great. If you could give our listeners any advice about following their dreams, because you've followed a lot of yours, what would that be?
Take a step.
Yeah.
It sounds so, what is it? Simple, but it's not easy, whatever, I might get those two mixed up, but um I was talking to a client the other day, first time I had met with them, and they're a professor getting ready to think about retiring. I mean, super, super smart. I've done a bunch of stuff in their career. And we were talking about, like, did they think they had a calling? Like, did they already know, what God had called them to do? And they were like, yeah, like for 10 years.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why haven't you done anything? Well, I'm an analyzer, and I analyze everything. And I was like, well, what's the first step you need to take? And, and it was just like, oh, it's that simple, you
Yeah.
know? But they've been stuck all these years trying to analyze and think about everything, and making it really difficult. So for me, it's that first step. A lot of people ask me, well, what do I do if to write a book? Like, I want to write a book. I got a story. Okay, sit down and write.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And, it's biblical too. God doesn't give us too many doesn't shine his light on too many of the steps ahead. He might give us the generalized large dream, but he reveals one step at a time the small obediences that are all going to move in the same direction. There's actually a book called that by Eugene Peterson, Small Obediences in the Same Direction, where as we are obedient to the things he gives us, he reveals the next step. And honestly, who else would you rather follow? Because the steps he's going to give us are going to be things that are going to be exciting and fun for us to do, that use everything about how he's made us. And they're going to glorify him. And they're going to help people. And they're going to connect us to other lives where we can love on people in whatever way we're uniquely created. And where else would you want to be?
100%, 100%. I built a trail system on my house, or at my house. I have 10 acres, and I name every trail that I build. And there was this little opening that I bet I walked by that opening 100 times. And every time it was like, and I know this sounds crazy, but it was like I could feel God just say, like, just take a step in there.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you're not going to know what it looks like until you walk in there. And it just looked like too many weeds and too many branches. And I just, every time I looked at it, it seemed so overwhelming compared to the other trails that I had built that were kind of open, and I didn't have to do as much work. And finally one day, and it was a deer trail, and finally one day I took a step of faith, and that trail is now named Faith.
Mm-hmm.
And man, guess what it did? That trail took me to hit my other trail. And then there was another trail that went off of it to the most beautiful tree that I would have never seen it if I wouldn't have made these kind of two trails. And it is my favorite tree on my property. And that
Wow.
little trail then runs back and it hits another trail. And I was just like, wow, that's what our faith walk with God looks like. He calls us in, but you have to take that first step into something that at times looks messy and scary, and like there's a whole bunch of stuff in there. But if you keep walking in,
Yeah.
guess what? It continued to open up. Like
Yeah.
that trail continued to open up.
That's beautiful. And, he's always calling us to go. Who's going to go for me?
Mm-hmm.
All through the
Yeah.
Bible, he's asking people to leave their comfort zone and to go into the unknown, because he is there and he knows what's there, what he has for us.
Yeah. He's already walked it.
Yeah. So finally, I love to add, this is my favorite question, is because the answers are always so good. If you could give your younger self any advice, what would that be?
Yeah, I think when we talked, I said this answer probably already always changes depending on what mood I'm in for the day. But I think for me, it's consistently being, let's see here. I want to change this a little bit. Like creating the space in the morning. And this is going to sound a little cliche, but spending that morning, having that morning routine, starting your morning off with God,
Mhm.
in devotional, in prayer, and being in the word, asking him for guidance to lead the day. God, lead me today where you'll have me to go,
Mhm.
and giving that control over to him and stop trying to be in control of everything. I know that's kind of a couple of things in one, but
You're allowed as many things as you want to tell
yeah.
your young.
So I think that's for me. And the reason
Yeah.
why I say that is because when I started doing that consistently,
Mhm.
is that's when I started to see so many changes in my life. And he's always teaching me lessons in the morning, like when I'm in the word of God, it's a new lesson every day of
Absolutely.
how we act and how we treat people, and things of this world, and just something new every day. And I love to sit in that. And I will say I rarely have bad days anymore, because when you start off with God,
Yes.
start off in gratitude. Actually, that's the latest book that I have coming out, Thank You Notes to God, and it's just a prayer and gratitude journal, and it
Yeah.
gets you in of scripture and writing out what you're grateful for,
Yeah.
and writing out a prayer. to God each day. And I regret that I didn't, start doing that much sooner in my life, but live and learn.
That is wonderful advice. And you might have given somebody a new way that they can start right now. And honestly, I'm in 100% agreement. I believe that every day God has something new to share with us that we can share with others. And it's meant to be shared. Some of it's very personal, but some of it's meant to be shared. I think he gives us revelation to give as a blessing to others sometimes. And I wish more people would share the good, beautiful things that he shares with us. It reminds me what you were saying of, well, I was on a mission trip in Malawi, Africa one time, and I was so amazed that in the morning you'd get up early and I would spend all this time in the Bible, and I would worship and I would get prepared. And then we'd go out on these dusty trails to these little villages, and every single bit of scripture or thing that God had shown me, I got to use all day long. Like I didn't have to wonder what I was supposed to say to this person or that person. I already had it. It was this litany of things he had given me in the morning, and I would kind of use it all up as I gave it all out, and then come home, or it wasn't home, but we were at an orphanage, come back, we would go to bed exhausted and get up and start over again in the morning. And I don't think you have to go to a foreign country to live on mission like that. I think what you're saying, if you get up in the morning and you let God show you everything he wants to show you for that day, and then you go give it out in whatever ways that he guides you, and then come home and you sleep well and you start over the next day.
Yep, 100%. And I wish we could dig into Malawi because, oh my gosh, I don't know if we talked about that, but oh gosh, okay, we need to reconnect on that.
We do. Yeah, one of my favorite trips ever. It's just an amazing experience. So yeah, let's do that. Well, we're connected now, so you are now part of my podcast family and a new friend, and we thank you, Jazz, for that. I look forward to another conversation, and I'm looking forward to all the things that you're putting out. We will be putting in the show notes some ways for people to get a hold of all that you're doing, to get a hold of your books or see what you've done with your TEDx talk or whatever else that you give me. Look in the show notes, everyone, they'll be there. I want to just thank you so much, Stephanie, for making time to talk to me. I know a lot of people who do podcasts don't require so much time, but I ask people to do a pre-recording call and then to spend quite a lot of time on the actual podcast. But I believe that way we really get to know each other. But I know that time is valuable. So I'm so grateful for you doing that. I'm so excited about all that you're doing in the world, in all the ways that you're sharing and giving God glory and just loving others. Thank you for being with us.
Oh, thank you so much, and fabulous use of time.
Oh, well, thank you. All right. Well, we're going to have to talk again very soon.
Yes, absolutely.
Have a great day.
You too.
Hey, so I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with me. And I want to challenge you to go out today and to just take notice and to stop and really look around and find at least one good thing, one thing to be thankful for. If you do that today, you're going to find so many more things tomorrow without even trying. Because once you start, you begin to see what's always been there. And if you need a refill, you can come join me again for another cup. Make sure to subscribe and have an awesome day and go be grateful.